Of all the people in this conversation, I suspect I am the only one who's never been to Brazil. Am I right?
Yes.
I think you are.
Although I have watched that Terry Gilliam film from like the 80s. Does that count? Is that good enough?
The film is good enough, but the fact that you've never been to Brazil is not good enough. Go. Just go.
Terrible, Jimmy.
Although I must say, from what I've watched from tonight's two films, Brazil looks glamorous and warm and beautiful, but it also looks like a quite frightening place to visit.
In the 60s and 70s, yeah, probably was, right?
That's where I've been going wrong. Okay.
You should go. It is beautiful. To me, like Rio especially is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It really is incredible. And I think once in your lifetime, you should definitely go to Rio. But of course, it's very messy. It's chaos. It's dangerous. But I think...
You're not convincing me here. Yes, it's lovely. You may get shot, but yeah.
But totally worth it.
Hello, everyone across the world. This is the Two Real Cinema Club, and my name is Andres Lorente.
And I am James Rosica. And every episode on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch two movies. There's a clue in the name. We watch a new movie, and we watch an old movie that it has maybe something in common with, and then we compare A with B. But this week we're comparing A with B with C because we have a guest.
We do.
Hey, yes.
Oh, there she is, yes.
Is that me?
As you can tell, we do have a guest. We have poor weather on the east coast of the United States, probably a little bit better in England, but in Dubai, where our secret agent lives, it is sunny, and Inês Braga always brings sunshine to the Two Real Cinema Club. So welcome, Inês Braga.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be back.
Always a pleasure to have you on the pod.
Not sure about the sunshine, though.
At last, we're both looking at each other saying, at last, someone who knows something about movies on this podcast. Thank God for that.
Not true.
So this week we are still mopping up Oscar movies. Did you see all the Oscar movies this year, Inês?
I think so, but don't try me on that.
I bet you've done better than us. We're still mopping them up. So we have watched the Best International Oscar winner this week. I'm Still Here, Walter Salles movie. And we will be comparing it a little bit later on to 4 Days in September from 1997, with which it overlaps quite a bit.
Yes.
We were talking earlier on about how little I know about South America. I am pretty sure if you asked 100 people in the UK, please name someone from South America, the most popular answer would be Paddington Bear. It is not part of the world which is very well known in the UK. I mean, I'm only speaking for myself. It's not very well known in my brain. I'm sure there are cleverer people than me walking the streets who know all about Brazil, but I do not. So these two films, bit of a revelation for me.
Paddington's from where? Is he from Argentina or Chile?
From
Peru.
Yeah, darkest
Peru is the new
isn't
film.
it? Yes.
Oh, see, I don't know much about Paddington Bear, so right back at you, James.
So you're doing I'm Still Here.
When you say you, if you mean me, then yes, I am doing...
Pointing on the internet doesn't work, does it? Not on a podcast. I'll nod my head in your direction instead.
Yes, I'm Still Here. Directed by Walter Salles, screenplay by Murillo Hauser, and Heitor Lorega, and Selton Mayo, who's in this film.
Ah.
And I think he's becoming a friend of the pod because I think he's in another film we'll be talking about soon, too. So there you go. The cast features Fernanda Torres, of course, as Eunice, or Eunice. It's probably Eunice in Portuguese.
Eunice.
Paiva. Fernando Montenegro, I think, plays Eunice as the elder, and she might even be Fernanda Torres' mother. Is that correct? I don't know if I read that correctly. And then Selton Mayo plays Rubens
Paiva. Yeah.
Rubens Paiva. Shall I tell you a story in English?
Yes, please.
I won't do the synopsis in Portuguese. That would be
I'm disappointed.
Difficult for everyone involved. This film opens under ideal circumstances as Eunice Paiva swims in the waters of Rio de Janeiro while her children are playing volleyball on the beach. and where a stray dog adopts them, and they take him home to their father, Ruben Spaiva, for his approval. We see a lot of wonderful 8mm footage of Rio in the late 60s and early 70s when a military dictatorship is in power. One of Eunice and Ruben's daughters is stopped in a car with her friends when they enter a roadblock in a tunnel, and then they're frisked and interrogated. So we're getting all these messages that times in Rio de Janeiro and Brazil in general are probably not very good.
So, and it's kind of normalizing oppression as well, isn't it? It's like saying this is what you encounter just when you're out driving with your friends. It's everywhere.
Yeah, that happens. And sadly, it still happens across the world. I won't say where because we're trying to really be careful with our language to
avoid being frisked every time we drive anywhere. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
We also
Trump is listening.
We get these little bits of news on the radio. I think that's in the car of the teenagers when they're driving. There's a Swiss ambassador who's being kidnapped in order to force concessions and a release of political prisoners from the dictatorship. So the story world and the tone are set up very early. It's a wonderful contrast because Brazil just looks beautiful. Rio is sunny. It looks just like a joyous place to live, but there are evil forces lurking below the surface, I suppose.
I'm going to turn the clock slightly back to that very opening image. That's the one thing we bang on about every week, because I think the opening image of this film really summarizes the whole film tremendously well. Because not only is it so it's Eunice swimming in the water, but as she surfaces, a military helicopter goes sort of overhead, doesn't it? Yeah. And I feel like that single shot contains so much of the whole of the rest of the film. It's about it because it's kind of saying, "Oh, look, it's trouble in paradise."
Exactly.
And at the same time, it's saying this film is about keeping your head above water, which I guess is like the central theme of the movie. Or if not keeping your head above water, it's about choosing when to hide and when to come to the surface. I think it's a very clever little opening shot. I think it summarizes the rest of the movie very intelligently.
I totally agree. I think it's so good, that opening shot, and again, it just summarizes how the movie itself will move between these two registers, right? Like the family life and how they will carry on, and the horrible oppressive regime and how they have to coexist.
Yes.
These two horrible levels. And it's incredibly beautifully done. I really enjoyed that opening sequence.
I guess after her troubles with the law, the family decides to send Veroca to live with some friends in London. So we're visiting both Brazil and London a little bit today. But all the while, Rubens is sort of clearly planning some sort of action against the government. It's not that secretive. I mean, it's secretive in their house, but it seems like the family and friends are all aware of what's happening. We learn that he is actually a former congressman from the days before the dictatorship. So it's probably no surprise that the government comes to arrest him. But will the family ever see him again? Will he join his family at that perfect address to enjoy their ideal revolutionary bohemian hipster family life? What will Eunice have to go through in order to see her husband again or to clear his name? Or will she wisely refuse to sell that house and property and decide to just swim, swim, and swim?
Oh, I know which one I would prefer to choose if at all possible. Brilliant. So the army turns up at pretty much exactly 30 minutes. I checked my watch. So yeah, they turn up supposedly for a deposition at like the 30-minute moment. So it's a fairly kind of well paced
turning point.
Yeah, exactly. It's that's our kind of sort of first into second act turning point.
We talk about opening doors and windows, and actually someone comes right through the door into their perfect existence at about that moment. So definitely
shatters their existence. But again, what I love about this film and Walter's direction is also the subtlety. And there's a really lovely moment when he's fixing his tie, and I think his daughter Eliana comes in and helps him and asks where you're going, and he just again tries to maintain the normalcy of the whole situation, being totally aware that he probably will never return. And it's just so powerful because we can see by his face that he doesn't know, and especially because he had been in exile before, it's suggested. So he's totally aware of what he's done.
Yeah.
And so that moment feels particularly poignant and so well handled, I felt.
Yes, I kind of say the same thing every week, but my favourite scenes are always ones where, you know, the dialogue and what's happening in the scene are, you know, utterly perpendicular, and that's, you know, a perfect example of that, isn't it? They're talking about these kind of very ordinary, normal, boring things, you know, and whereas, you know, what he is doing is trying to kind of soak up these last few seconds with his daughter, knowing that he probably won't get any more. It's a beautiful, underwritten, simple scene. Lovely bit of work. We'll ring the spoiler bell in a minute, because there are things to spoil about this film. But does anybody want to chime in with something spoiler-free?
Spoiler-free, like without an expiration date kind of thing.
We could talk about perhaps Fernanda Torres' performance.
Yes.
And how she leads this mother courage type of film, isn't it? It just feels, again, there's so much dignity to her, and she was nominated for the Oscar of Best Film. She won the Golden Globe, to everyone's surprise. She was BAFTA nominated as well.
Yeah.
And she's the daughter of Fernanda Montenegro. Actually, she's both her parents, both called Fernanda and Fernando,
that's right.
are like the creme de la creme of the artistic scene in Brazil. Like her dad was also an actor. He was a founder of theatre, very well known in Brazil. And the mother, Fernanda Montenegro, is probably the greatest living actresses in Brazil. She's just phenomenal. And I think she's in her 90s now.
Yeah.
And she appears at the end. Is that a spoiler?
Yeah.
As you mentioned already, right? That she appears as the older Eunice.
I did. That's kind of not a spoiler. So you were
up.
working within James's confines there of not spoiling anything.
And very interestingly, I think also Fernanda Montenegro was the star of Walter's previous film called Central Station that was also Oscar nominated. She both and the film. So he had worked with her before, and actually he had worked with Fernanda Torres, the daughter, in A Foreign Land. I don't know if you've ever seen that film.
No.
It's his first movie, actually, and it's set in Portugal. It's a beautiful. It's his first fictional movie, because Walter started in documentaries. I think he worked in documentaries for about 10 years, and then he moved on to fiction, and Foreign Land was his first movie, and it starred Fernanda Torres. So this is, we're talking about two actresses that he, has worked for over a period of 30 years or more. Yeah. So it's incredible to see. And I think he said he contacted Fernanda Montenegro, the mother, first, because he wasn't sure if Fernanda Torres would be available to play the daughter and Eunice. Yeah. But of course she was. And I think it was just a match made in heaven.
I think without giving too much away, for me, I was a little bit off guard, because this really becomes Eunice's story. And you get inklings of that, I guess, in the beginning. And obviously we open on her swimming, but it felt like a family piece, or that it might not be uniquely her story. And it obviously is sort of there are group consequences for everything she does, but it becomes her story by the time the second act rolls in.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt for the first 15 minutes of the movie that it was going to be the daughter's story, the oldest daughter. So she's the one who is, seems like the shaker and the mover, and she's a dynamic character, and she's the one who gets sent off to London. And I was kind of expecting it to be her story, so I was a little bit surprised when it turned out that we were going to focus on the mother. That's
a good point, actually, because he focuses in the beginning a lot on the group, right? A lot on the family dynamics of the ensemble, to see like what, I think it's almost like to establish that normalcy, that love that existed in that family, how it was like paradise and perfect, and it got completely shattered when he's taken away. Rubens.
I'm not super familiar with Salles' oeuvre, so I think I've seen Central Station, I've seen City of God, I've seen The Motorcycle Diaries. I think the last film of his that I watched before this was Dark Water, which is that Japanese horror remake from about 20 years ago with Jennifer Connelly, I think. So, I think the last film he made before this was On the Road with with Kirsten Stewart, which is from 2012. So he's kind of hasn't made a feature for 13 years.
Yes.
or 12 years or so. So it's nice to see him back. I'm guessing, Inês, from the way that you talk, you've met him, have you?
I have, actually. It was...
I've always liked that with people when I refer to them by their first name. What's he like? Is he all right?
He's my friend. It's not that he's my friend. But I did meet him when... I met him in London, actually, at the BFI. When he came to... There was a film that he did in partnership with Daniela Thomas, who he collaborates at sometimes, who's a Brazilian filmmaker. And they did a film called Linha de Passe, about this footballer, or like the dreams of this young footballer in São Paulo. And it was just a lovely little film. And at the end, I think, because I was already working, I think it was done in 2008, 2009. And by that time, I think I was already working with Sergio and Karim on Alice. And so we had this mutual friend, and Sergio had worked with him in Central Station and Behind the Sun, which was another of his films. And so we had mutual friends, and I also, as you know, love football. So I guess it was easy, was a person that I was easy to talk to. But he was there with his wife, and then we went out for dinner. And he's just a really lovely man and incredibly talented. And also his presence in Rio, his brother is also a documentary maker, João. He's the editor of an amazing cultural magazine called Piauí. That is a monthly magazine. And they also own a foundation cultural center called Instituto Moreira Salles. I don't know if you went, Andres, when you were there in Gávea, which is this incredible building. That used to be their house. So, their legacy and their contribution to the arts in Brazil is pretty incredible. And I'm really pleased that he went back. I don't think On the Road is his finest film. So I'm glad that he went back to Brazil and to a story that is, exactly, a story that is very close to him, because he grew up with that family. He grew up with them. He was one of the kids that used to play. He grew up. He knew the family very closely.
So does somebody playing him appear in the background, I wonder?
Probably, I think one of the kids that was playing football with Marcelo. I thought that could be the case.
Because that was my one other question I was going to ask before we ring the spoiler bell, which is that this movie is based very closely on a true story about real people. But how well known will these personalities be to your average Brazilian audience member? Are these people household names in Brazil?
I think Eunice Paiva. I think Eunice Paiva for sure. She fought this battle for so many years. We're talking about like 50 years, right? Even it was already in 96, I think, when 25 years later, right? When she finally got the death certificate. Oh dear.
Oh, spoilers.
Okay. Well, anyway, going back to your question. Yeah, I think they're very well known. And again, Brazil is huge. It's a very, very big country, but certainly within Rio and São Paulo and the intellectual elite, they would be quite well known.
Because it's when you mentioned the intellectual elite, that's what explains to me why I don't know.
Okay, not
them.
elite. Yes.
They're not really well known to thickos, so don't worry, James.
No.
Let's ring the spoiler bell. We've hauled this bell out of the ocean near Rio, so we'll ring it, and then we can spoil away. Right, it's open season now.
Woohoo! Go, Andres.
Yeah, everything sounds better in Brazil, even that spoiler bell. It's a bit of the samba to it, doesn't it?
More cowbell, yes.
Well, as I said, I mean, it does become Eunice's story much more in the second act, because these men come to the house and they hang out with the family. It seems for like a couple of days. They've taken away Rubench, and Eunice's there with these sort of they're not soldiers, they're just sort of plainclothes goons, I guess. And I found it so much more menacing. I think in an American film they'd probably have big guns and they'd be very cast for type, sort of just very caricaturish like humans, but they're just quiet. They actually sort of integrate into the family. They're playing foosball with Marcella, and dancing with the girls, I think, a little bit. So it's even scarier because they're not overtly menacing. It's just it's very well done.
Exactly.
And it just makes it seem like, oh, this is perfectly normal. It's okay to have some government people or some goons from the dictatorship hanging out in your living room for a day or two. And then she and the other daughter get sort of hauled into the police station somewhere. They're getting arrested. They're detained. They're interrogated. I think Eunice is in the facility for a couple of weeks. It seems like she's hearing torture. Yeah. She's wondering if Hubench is there. And there is this one sympathetic police officer, but what I liked about his role is he's sort of taking her in and out of the interrogation room and back to her cell. And what I liked about it is you don't really know if he can even be trusted. Like maybe he's just pretending to be sympathetic. So I think the quiet menace in this film is really ever present, and it's a very strong feature in the story.
Absolutely.
There's basically we hit the 30-minute mark to start the second act, and then it's like 2 15-minute sequences, isn't it? Because I checked my watch again. There says 15 minutes of them in the house waiting for the father to return, and then 15 minutes when she and the daughter are scooped up and she is interrogated, sees nobody. They have a hood on her head. I mean, it's all awful. And we see kind of little cutaways of the secret police washing down the corridors, presumably to sweep away the blood. I mean, it's a pretty shocking, dramatic, 2 15-minute sequences. For me, those 2 sequences were the highlight of the film. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about how I felt after that from there on in. But up to that kind of 60-minute mark when she gets released, I was absolutely with it. I was glued to the screen.
Yeah.
Me too. No, and also the fact that her daughter, right, Eliana, was also there.
Yeah.
And she didn't know, the mum didn't know what was going on with her.
Yeah.
Yes.
And only later she finds out that she was released. This is after her husband had disappeared. So imagine like how she must have felt. And again, there's so much self-control in that performance, right? It's just there's so much dignity and subtlety. Again, it's this sort of quiet, powerful, it's filled with, right, these quiet, powerful moments. And I really think, especially like when there's that interchange, and going back to what you said, Andres, about the guard, and at the very end of that sequence, he says something like, I don't approve of this, right?
Yep.
And it's just that one line of dialogue. Only at the very end when we know that she's already been released, because I agree with you, up until that point I really didn't know. It was so ambiguous. I really didn't know. So again, these moments I think are really powerful and so well executed.
I was confused by that I don't approve statement, because I was guessing that he was trying to tell her, I don't approve with waterboarding people. But it occurred to me a little bit after that, maybe he was saying, I don't approve of you being released without shopping in all of your friends and family. So I didn't quite understand whether he was being a goodie or being like, ultra bad at that point. I don't know whether it's intended to be ambiguous or whether it's just me failing to pick up on the cues.
I think you have a point there, but I really did feel from the interchange that it was, I don't approve of what we've all been doing here.
Yeah.
Okay. You always see the best in people. You're
What did you think, Andres?
I agree with James that you don't know what he's not approving, I guess. But I think the ambiguity is probably a good thing. But I think I agree also with Inês. I think that they're just trying to make put one good guy in there, or one guy that someone who's being interrogated at least thinks they can trust, because I think that's just that's sort of just a police technique, I believe.
Yeah.
So, and he plays it right up until the very end.
And also because they go back to the prison, remember, later on they go back to the prison and they get access. So I'm not sure if it was because of that interchange or not. So that leads to believe that he was genuine.
Yeah. And I think it's also compelling to have people who don't approve of it sort of forced or feel obligated to go along with the dictatorship and sort of be the boots on the ground in the dictatorship. So I think that's a pretty good character to have, because it really gives you all these different perspectives into what Eunice is going through as well.
Exactly. I think it gives a little bit more complexity, right, to the whole situation, which is something that we can talk about in the second film.
Yeah.
I didn't feel it was handled in the same way.
So they're living sort of under surveillance for a little while too, because there are these guys hanging out across the street in a car watching the house, and it's probably right around the midpoint where the dog is killed.
Yes, I know. So, what does it say about me that was the most heartbreaking moment of the film for me?
Yep.
Me too. Honestly, I was devastated at that point. I just felt like I couldn't really recover from that. And it was a late night screening at Curzon Soho, and I didn't have anyone around me, and I just heard myself.
I don't think it's an accident, and I think that it's just another thing to show how the tentacles of the dictatorship reach into the lives of these people and destroy family. It's kind of like the end of this family, and maybe it's also an acknowledgement that Rubensch is probably dead as well. But it's a powerful moment. It's unsettling. And they do, around that time, they're also getting news that Rubens is alive. He's in prison. It's probably fake news, but because they're also hearing that he died somewhere else, and I thought they said in combat. I think that's what I read in the subtitles, but I'm not sure I caught that one. But simultaneously there's a sort of suggestion he's alive, but also this suggestion that he's dead. And at this point, Eunice is desperate for money. She's selling that dream house and the land also, where there are these moments that we see, I guess mostly in like 8mm family film stock, that they're planning to build this house somewhere and they have to sell it for cash, and the dream is over really, and just leaving that place is kind of an end of the family, and this sort of implicit acknowledgement that he's not coming back ever. They have to fire their live-in maid, and Barocca has come back from London, and there's some sort of magazines doing an article on the family and his disappearance, and there's this, there are a couple pictures there are 3 pictures in this film, one for each act, I guess. In the beginning, it's this beautiful family and friends scene on the beach when Barocca's about to go to London. In the middle, there's this magazine article. They're doing a shoot on their steps, and I think the photographer and the reporter ask them to, be somber, not smile. And then and Eunice says, no, we're going to smile, and they're all smiling for this picture. And then there's this sad departure from the Rio house. They have to leave it behind, and they're moving in the third act. They're going to move to Sao Paulo. And I don't know Sao Paulo at all, but boy, I'm sure it's a nice city, but leaving Rio. Ugh.
Yes.
Ugh. Especially where they lived. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was heartbroken. Probably almost as heartbroken as when the dog died. Just seeing them with Rio in the rear view mirror was uncomfortable for me. So
I think that house no longer exists. Actually, we used to go, and Andres visited my friends later after I moved back to London from Rio. But I used to go to that beach. It's like Posto 12 in Leblon, and it has the 2 Morro dos Dois Irmãos, which is like that hill. There's the 2 Brothers Hill. And that was my favorite thing to do, to swim in that sea. It was incredible. It was like my daily routine. And it was interesting because when I really recognized where, the Delfim Moreira Avenue, where the house corners on that avenue. And I think I looked at Google Maps, and because I was wondering, I was like, I can't remember seeing that house. I'm sure it's all buildings now, and it is. So I think that house was demolished and gave way to this massive condominium. So that whole avenue is full of them. And I think they shot in Urca, which is also a very beautiful area in the south. In the south of Rio. But that I think that moment, and another very subtle, and I love the act of defiance right there when she says smile. And he insists, and then she goes smile. It just really is a great act of defiance and a great character moment, isn't it?
Now, this moment when they leave the house, this kind of highlights one of my complaints about this film. So I did enjoy it. I'm not sure I enjoyed it as much as you two maybe. One of my complaints is that this film ends 5 times. And this leaving the house, this is one of the endings. And we got to the point where they were leaving the house, and the daughter was filming her kind of 8mm footage of them driving away, and this was a big turning point. And I kind of felt like, this was a cinematic drawing of a line, thick and black enough that I felt like, we're probably heading for the end credits in a couple of minutes now. And yet we are not.
No.
This is just, we're kind of now going to get flicked into the third act.
Yeah.
And I think there are probably 4 more endings before we finally get to leave the cinema.
Yep.
Which I found a little bit annoying. But but I'm quite prepared to be told I'm an ignorant fool who needs to buck up and improve his ideas. Tell me about the third act.
Well, I'm going to agree with you. I think the third act is essentially a different film. It immediately says 25 years later. It skips ahead 25 years. It's connected to the rest of the film by another swimmer, but this time in a swimming pool, not in the ocean and in the sunlight, and just in a different city as well. And I felt like it lost energy. For me, the third act kind of loses energy because it gets into some sort of like the bureaucracy of the case and some of the just mundane things of life after Hubench, I guess. So Eunice at this point is a lawyer, and she's protecting the Amazon forest from land grabbers. So this is, I think, the earlier mid-90s at this point. So it is 25 years later, so mid-90s. She finally gets this death certificate from the government for Hubench, and it's a sort of an acknowledgement, obviously, that the government was involved. So she's finally getting closure, but she's in her probably 60s or even 70s, at least 60s at that point, I think.
It must be, yes.
Yeah.
And then Marcelo's there. He's in a wheelchair by this point. He's the son, their only son, and the kid who's been playing soccer on the beach and volleyball on the beach, and he's the one who adopted the dog. And Babiou is, I think, the youngest daughter, maybe younger than Marcelo. And there's this poignant moment, I think, where Babiou asks Marcelo, "When did you bury him?" And I guess she says that moment that James just alluded to, like leaving that house, was when she realized he was never going to come home again. Her father was never going to come home, and that's when she buried him. And now he's just a scrapbook. He's just a picture in a scrapbook from the day they moved out of.
Sorry to interrupt. Also, I feel you mentioned it before. They buried also his dream when they left the house and that land, because again, that was Ruben's dream. That was his house. So.
So it's, I guess that third act is not necessarily that long, and you could have left off when she's holding up the certificate in front of the press or something like that. You might have just not had this third act of the film, but we eventually see these more home videos. Now it's sort of in Super 8 because it's 2014 and their family's getting together for a like a meal with an elderly Eunice at this point. She's in a wheelchair, and I think a new theme sort of emerges. I think that third act is all about themes. She's struggling with her memories. Some memories of Hubench are jogged when she just happens to see something on television. She's sitting alone in the room. She's quite unresponsive to her family and interactions with her family, but they sort of stick her in. We all do this with our elderly grandparents, don't we? We stick them in front of the TV. And there's this news piece that I think mentions even Hubench by name. And this film ends on, I guess, the third photograph. It's an alternative family photo from what we saw on the beach earlier or from what we saw in the magazine. And, there's this one thing, Hubench is not there. This is, the only photo that he's actually in is that first one. But you also get the sense that, like, they remember him, they don't remember him that well, and he'll be young forever as a result, right? I mean, Hubench is never going to be more than whatever he was, 45 years old or something like that. And I think we can talk more about the themes later, but I do see that as a major theme in the film. It's like memory and survival. But I turn it over to you if you guys have any other thoughts before we get into our actual thoughts of the film.
So I mean, we're kind of right at the end here, aren't we? And you get this kind of freeze frame of the photo of the family at the party. Yep. So we've had one ending as they leave the house in Rio, then another ending as she finally gets the death certificate, and there's a little sort of press conference, and then we have a third ending with the very elderly Eunice, whose kind of memory is jogged by the television program, and then we have like a whole bunch of photographs of the real family, which is like the fourth ending. Oh yeah, and so this is even before the credits. We get some photographs of the real characters in the film as they really were. And then there is a fifth ending, because then we have a tour of the empty house. And I'm guessing from what you're saying, Inês, this is not a tour of the real empty house. This is maybe an empty version of the house where they shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
but it's like this fifth ending about, which is kind of it's about just what you were saying about how the house they were going to build was like a symbol of their future. Mm-hmm. And now instead we just have this kind of symbol of all the things that have been lost. It's, this what's lonelier than an empty house, that once had a family in it and now has no one. And then I think we go back to more photographs of family and friends again for the end credits, don't we? It's almost like there is 6 endings to this movie. It keeps kind of tossing in, an extra ending, and another bit, and another bit. It's like that family friend who, you phone them up and then, they will never let you get off the phone because they'll always tell you, and another thing. Let me tell you what I'm having for my tea tonight. And I saw a bird in the garden. I've had enough now, actually. Probably need to move on. It did leave me feeling like I'd seen rather too many endings by the time I left the cinema. But that's a bit churlish. It's a great film. I enjoyed it.
I agree. It loses momentum, right? Yeah. It really loses momentum at that point. And I feel it's almost like it tries to put some facts right, like historical facts. And we have to remember that this is based on his memoir, so Marcelo's memoir. So it's based on the book that he wrote. So perhaps there was, and he co-wrote also the script. And I feel, or at least, was heavily involved. I think the script was in development for about 7 or 8 years. And I think he might have wanted to have that ending. But I also agree that in terms of themes, it helps. I think because there's 2 moments that I felt in the third act. 2 ideas here. That one is that she succeeded in keeping the family together, right? And that final photograph that was the main goal, right? She kept the family together. Mm-hmm. They were all there, full of scar, isn't it? And that is incredible because that is her whole arc, but at the expense of so much suffering. And I think the fact that she had Alzheimer's and she was so unwell at the end is very moving because, of course, this whole fight took a massive toll on her. And the second theme is, again, as you said, James, all the things that they lost, and that empty house was quite moving in that respect. But I agree with both of you. And I felt that perhaps if the film had finished with the death certificate, he would have achieved, and perhaps just one final shot of the house, he would have achieved the same, but in a more effective, tense way, which I think, again, it lost momentum in the third act. But still, I thoroughly enjoyed the film. Yeah. And I didn't really look at the clock, I was just totally engaged and engrossed in the story, and the performances are so rich. I felt like that this is just so good, and the soundtrack, which we can devote a whole podcast to the amazing score by Warren Ellis, Nick Cave's partner, and also with the incredible hits of Tropicalia. But we can talk about it further down the line.
You're kind of right that it's all. I mean, it's clearly Eunice's story. And she is incredibly strong. I wrote here in my notes, I wrote, she is strong to the point of being made of wood and steel. But she is so strong that I felt I missed a little bit of weakness. I felt like, she keeps it together so very, very well. I felt like I slightly missed one scene that might hint at her questioning whether she can keep it together. How
about the shower scene?
The shower scene.
Yeah.
When she comes back, that was the moment for me, when she comes back from the torture.
She does. I was a little bit surprised by the choice that the character makes in that scene, because I was imagining that if you were released from prison after 2 weeks or a week or 3 weeks or however long it was, you would go and see your kids first and then have a shower, whereas she chooses dignity over disturbing their sleep, doesn't she? And she wants to go and wash the prison grime off herself before she sees anybody else.
Exactly, because it's the same image, isn't it?
And I think that's a big character moment that tells you something about her. But the thing it tells you about her is that there are no chinks in her armor.
You could also look at it as she's really thinking about how her children would process her walking in bruised and in soiled clothes and all that. So maybe that she wants to present that image that
Yeah.
She survived. It wasn't as bad as it actually was, or she's just trying to hide some ugly truth from her children.
I agree with you. I always feel
I need to be a better dad. That's what you're telling me.
as a mum, I really admire that moment because I feel no matter what, she always tries to protect her children and preserve that dignity and the way they look at her as, the matriarch of that family. And that, to me, I found it so, so difficult. And the fact that, yes, she goes and, have a shower and makes herself presentable before she goes and see her children. That was so powerful for me.
I found this film surprisingly timely.
Yeah.
And I know you were kind of saying earlier that we're going to try and stay away from politics, but detention and kind of like detention and disappearance, people being swiped off the streets, it seems to be something that is back in the news again. Shockingly.
Yeah, the film has zeitgeist written all over it. Now, sometimes I'm just amazed how well, because you're making a film, you've got to be thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead of yourself.
Yes.
Really. And sometimes you just get lucky because the rest of the world is unlucky. But I think you're right. It's totally timely, and ultimately, I think I'll go to theme quickly here because this is one of those films that just has "we must remember the past" or "we repeat it" written all over it, right? And I think this film on another level is definitely about memory. It's sort of reinforced by the fact that Eunice has Alzheimer's or memory problems later on. So I think it's about memory and how we remember, and also how we survive. But at the same time, neither memory or survival is really real. They're not concrete. Neither one of them endure. We lose our memories. We lose our lives. No. And there's even this moment towards that. I think it's the last photograph scene or maybe a little earlier. It might be when Babu and Marcelo and Eunice are in their dining room in Sao Paulo, but they don't seem to remember when the photo of Veruca's beach party moment was taken. So they're struggling to remember things. Obviously, she's struggling to remember things. So I think much of this film is about memory, and of course, it's a period piece as well. And the look and the sound of the film is fantastic, and that just sort of really underscores the feeling. And I'm sure you guys noticed that, it's very, very colorful, almost looks like they were shot on film for the first 2 acts. And then you get to that third act and it has this video look, right? Because it's the 90s. So just really careful attention, I think, to how the film was made, how it looks, how it sounds.
Early on in the film, the oldest daughter, I can't remember her name, but she says they went to the movies to go and see Blow Up, doesn't they? And,
Yep.
And I was kind of thinking about, how come they chose that movie to be the one that she had, gone to see? And I think either they went to see it, but she says something, the sound was bad, we left the movies or something like that. But it's interesting that is the film that they've chosen, and not just to ground the movie in a very specific time, but also, that also is about how using photographs to help you remember, or discovering and retaining memories, finding kind of depths in things that you thought you remembered one way and it turns out it's the other way. It's it's a clever choice of movie for them to have gone to see.
Very intentional. And you probably noticed this too, that when Rubens is talking in the bookstore right before Veruca's going to leave, I don't know if it's one of them's holding it or it's on the shelf right behind them, but it's the Diary of Anne Frank. So these there are these lovely little clues throughout the film, and I think those are just nice little touches from filmmakers. They're really kind of just giving you this visual shot of what theme they're focusing on.
So I think this film is a terrific achievement. I'm sure it probably deserves that Best International Film gong. And I'm glad that it's going to get a wider audience, especially in light of what we're seeing in the headlines at the moment. But for all of that, I am still worried that we may get a visit from the plain clothes military police version of the Cliché Squad.
Cliché Squad. They're everywhere. Quietly menacing that Cliché Squad.
And it feels churlish as always when we talk about a good film to point out the cliches. I did write 2 down in my notebook, though. The first one was convenient TV. So at the end of the movie, the elderly Eunice, who can't remember anything, but it's very lucky that they just happened to leave her on in front of the telly at the very moment that exactly the piece of television footage she needed to watch was. That's very handy. Well done, television company. And the other one I wrote down was just dogs as metaphor. That dog is so cute.
Yeah.
That from the very moment it turns up on screen, something's going to happen to that dog. I can tell. That's such a sweet little dog. It's not going to survive more than 25 minutes, I reckon. I'm guessing the dog story probably really happened, and it probably was a real dog. The family probably did have that happen. Yeah. But it still felt just a little bit too telegraphed. Yeah. The moment those sweet little legs and those big dark eyes turned up.
I agree with you on the dog, and you beat me to the TV moment. That was I only had one. It was something relevant coming on television at the best possible moment to offer us just a little bit of very necessary exposition. And actually, after having seen our companion film, it happens probably more in the companion film than it did in the
yes.
Oh my god! So, there's one moment, a couple of moments I would just. Connect to memory is that Hubens is not in this film for very long. He's just in the first 30 minutes or so, we said. But he gets a great moment of fatherhood with each child, and each one of those moments sort of leads to an important memory, it seems like, for the children. So I think that's something that you've done well in this film. And James and I talk about this pretty often, that everyone needs a little character arc, even if you're a minor character. The skillful filmmakers like Salles are going to put in some moment that tells their story in a very miniature version somehow. And, in that sense, you're getting the story for the child and the father in very, very efficiently. So the other thing that I would just mention is that when I was watching this film, I could not stop thinking about Roma by Cuarón. Because they're both films that are sort of investigations of children losing a father in the same time area. It's these heady days of the 60s and early 70s, and both families seem to be like these intellectual, artistic families. And I suspect that and now I'm finding out, this is somewhat autobiographic for Salles because he was around that family, and Cuarón's obviously making a very personal film in Roma. And they're also about losing homes, right? I mean, they both just capture the 60s and 70s so well. So I kept thinking about Roma, like this is Salles' Roma in some ways. And they're both beautiful, they're beautiful films in the ways that they capture the 60s and 70s. So the film just kept coming into my memory as I was watching this other film about memory.
One thing it's worth saying about this film, and I know we try to shy away from politics, I think, insofar I think we feel like maybe we don't want to stick our head too high above the parapet, but this film is surprisingly timely, maybe more timely now even than it appeared when they were shooting it. So detentions and disappearances and people being grabbed off the street is something that somehow seems to have returned to the headlines, and we seem to be seeing this coming back. I'm glad that art can address these issues. It's surprising and disappointing that this film is quite so timely at the moment that it's being released now.
Absolutely. It's vital, isn't it? And I think I read that Walter Salles mentioned that he couldn't have made this film in Bolsonaro's era. And again, the importance of not forgetting the past is really, I think, the main message of this film and the main reason why he decided to make this movie.
I looked it up a moment ago, and Walter Salles he's 68 now, so he's probably got a couple more feature films in him, I reckon.
I hope.
But it won't be very long before films about the 60s and the 70s will not be made by people who lived through those eras. It's only going to be so long before it will all pass, out of living memory entirely. So I'm glad we're seizing these moments and making films out of them while we can.
And I think also related to that theme of memory, not forgetting the past, and how important the music and the soundtrack is in this movie. How, for instance, most of the artists featured on the soundtrack, like Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, Gal Costa, Maria Bethânia, many of them were in exile Many of them had to flee the country during the dictatorship due to the censorship. And listening to that Tropicalia movement and all the songs that were featured in the film is just so brilliantly done. And again, Warren Ellis's work. I remember Assassination of Jesse James is the other work that I remember from Warren. You saw that, right, Lorente?
I think I did. That's the one with the very, very long title?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the guy who puts the letters up outside the cinema on the marquee hated that film.
Yeah. I mean, the title was as long as the film, and the film was long.
I remember it was with Brad Pitt, wasn't it?
Yes.
And even again, Juca Chaves, that was one of the artists also featured that fled to Portugal. So I love the fact that this is the sound of resistance. You know, this is the sound of artists that had to flee the country and they had to fight back. And I think it's very, I think it's an essential character as well. The soundtrack of the movie.
To a non-Portuguese speaker, it just sounds like exciting music that makes you shake your hips. And I really had no idea of the political content for a lot of this kind of Brazilian music from that era. Utterly went over my head.
Yeah, they're very important, and even like Tom Zé, Os Mutantes. Yeah, check it out. They're incredible. And this movement, Tropicalia, mixed traditional popular music with rock and avant-garde, and it was just a very important musical movement in Brazil.
Right. I think overall, I reckon we have a pretty positive impression of this movie.
Yes.
So I think Two Real Cinema Club says 2 thumbs up. Why we should
3 thumbs up.
I was going to say we should have about 5 endings to this half of the podcast. Maybe on the website we'll put up a very long, slow tour of an empty house while we go for a break. We'll have a break, and then we will come back and we'll talk about
squatters. Right? We have, and we just. We'll find where that house is, and this is your first trip to Brazil, James.
Yeah. No furniture, though.
Doesn't matter.
We'll come back.
You'll have the beach. You have the sand to sleep on.
Who needs furniture when you can sleep it on the beach? We will come back. We'll have a break. We'll come back. We will talk about another Brazilian masterpiece, in my opinion, 4 Days in September. This episode of the Two Real Cinema Club is brought to you by Deep Winge, the groundbreaking British AI. At last, Britain bursts onto the AI scene with a new AI model that you can try at home for free. Deep Winge has been trained on millions of hours of British journalism, television, radio and literature, and now tops the table in independent tests for world-weary commentary and snide, cynical remarks. It responds in natural language to any question, using its profound understanding of rain, rising prices, and poorly organised bus timetables. It can whine about the government, mutter under its breath about the traffic, and roll its eyes at the local council in seconds. And now Deep Winge can also draw images on request, producing as many pictures as you like of grey figures waiting for a train that's been cancelled or queuing up for a shop that's closed. Use Deep Winge to help you complain to your local MP, write a snotty letter to your doctor, or ask for a refund for that holiday when you got food poisoning. Deep Winge, bringing the voice of Britain to AI. Use it. Or don't. It doesn't care. In fact, it already hates you.
Welcome back. While some of us might want that Deep Winge application to complain about still being in Brazil, I will not complain about being in Brazil because we're going to be 4 more days there. as we talk about 4 Days in September from 1997.
Two Brazilian films back to back, but they've got a lot more in common than that. 1997, directed by Bruno Barreto, and I apologise deeply, especially to our Portuguese-speaking guests, because I will mispronounce everybody's name in this film. I am sorry. I apologise in advance. Inês, how do you pronounce the director of this film's name?
Bruno Barreto.
Oh, I've got it utterly wrong. Bruno Barreto. Okay, right. Oh,
very good.
Embarrassing. Written by Leopoldo Serran, something like that, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so this film is based on. I love this. It's based on a book which is called O que é isso, companheiro?
O que é isso, companheiro?
Okay.
And companheiro means like comrade or like companion.
Okay. I know when I'm beat.
So I think they tried to remove the remove the sort of communist connotation there, but they didn't really do a good job, I felt. So yeah, o que é isso, companheiro is the original title.
I think I've just proven, without saying it out loud, how little I know about Brazilian cinema. Andres, you chose this film, not me. I had neither seen nor heard of this film. So when did you first encounter this movie?
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
I think I first encountered it on the Independent Film Channel, I want to say 1999. Yep. So a couple years after it was out, I think it got a little play on the Independent Film Channel. And I remember it pretty clearly, just addressing the politics and the dictatorship, and again, sort of capturing that era. And it seemed like a good match, seemed very similar to me after having seen I'm Not Here. I really saw a lot of more connections. And I thought about it unknowingly, not realizing that Fernanda Torres and Celton Mayo are in both films.
Yes.
So I had not placed her in that film, so I was very pleased with myself, but with no good reason whatsoever that I had chosen this film that had some of the same character actors or some of the same actors. And it just seemed like a good fit, both for place and themes, and we saw them both.
Great fit. No false modesty there.
This film, just like I'm Still Here, it's based on a memoir of one of the characters who appears in the film. So it's the memoir of Fernando Gabeira.
Yeah.
He was a real member of a resistance group in Brazil in the 1970s. He really was involved in the kidnap of an American ambassador. He later became a journalist. He became the federal representative for Rio de Janeiro for 16 years until 2011. So this is one of those films which is ripped from the headlines, ripped from the diaries of the people who lived it. Nominated for Best Foreign Language Picture at the 1998 Oscars. That was the year that Titanic won everything, 1998. Do you know which film it lost out to in 1998? Which was the best foreign language picture that year?
Can't remember.
I certainly couldn't remember because I'd never even heard of it. It was a Dutch film called Karakter. Haven't seen it.
I don't think I've ever watched that.
Haven't heard of it. Okay, fine. I'm feeling slightly less thick now. I am not familiar with the career or the name of Bruno Barreto. The only thing I know about him is that he was married to Amy Irving for a while.
Yes.
Yeah,
really?
So he is actually stepfather to one of Steven Spielberg's children.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I think this is probably shot during that time, right?
Right. Yeah.
When he was married to her, probably.
Yes. I have one other. So I know, Inês, you know, Walter Salles. The soundtrack to this movie is by. I'm dining out on that forever now. The soundtrack to this film is by Stuart Copeland.
Oh.
Who was the drummer of The Police.
Yeah.
He previously done soundtracks for Wall Street, Riff Raff, Raining Stones. Unfortunately, he also did the soundtrack for Highlander 2. You can't win them all. This is my claim to fame. So I met his son, Jordan Copeland, on the short film circuit. He had made quite a nice short film. This is probably about 2004, 2005, and he was doing the short film circuit. Met him. I think we shared a taxi, something like that. Nice bloke. That's me. That's the sound of me dropping someone's name anyway.
Nice. Well done.
Wonderful.
And did that connection lead to anything? No, it didn't. Well, shall I tell you the story?
Great intro to the soundtrack, I thought.
Yeah. Shall I tell you the story of 4 Days in September?
Yes, please.
4 Days in September. It's a ripped from the headlines historical drama from Brazil set in 1969. Opening with news footage of rioters protesting against the military dictatorship, intercut with footage of the actors, so putting them there in the news. Fernando is a journalism student who wants to do something to help free his country from oppression. So he and his seminary student buddy join MR8, who are a kind of paramilitary group, led by the beautiful Maria, who is Fernanda Torres in this film, isn't she? Yeah, exactly. So they take on new names, they rob banks, but they realise that the newspapers will not report on them unless they do something big. So they plan to kidnap the American ambassador and take him to a safe house. But the group as it stands is too weak and too inexperienced to carry out a job like this on their own, so they are joined by two more seasoned and brutal paramilitary leaders. And once things get serious, they realise that if they kidnap someone and they make demands, they must be prepared to kill the ambassador if their demands are not met. Will they work together? Will they succeed? Will they be caught by the watchful state police? And once the deadline passes, will they put a bullet in the frightened but dignified diplomat?
Oof.
Oh,
Or is there another
James,
question?
that was brilliant.
Yes. I think they're going to put the bullet in him.
That's it. The end of first act, the end of the movie. Boom.
So I've already given away. I've showed my hand on this. I really enjoyed this film.
Yeah.
So you'd seen it before, Andres. Inês, had you seen it before?
No, I'm afraid, and I'm ashamed to say I had never heard of this film before. I knew of Bruno Barreto. He's quite well known, and I knew his. He made a really famous film in Brazil with Sônia Braga called Dona Flor e seus dois maridos. Dona Flor and her two husbands. Have you seen that film?
I have seen it a long time ago and loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. It was brilliant, and that was a huge hit in Brazil. And he had, he's a very prolific director. He's not like Walter that directs some films here and then. He does a lot of TV and other feature films. He shot another Brazilian-American co-production.
His big problem is he's not a billionaire, you see. That's what he's got to work for a living. Yeah.
Exactly. He has to shoot films every 2 years. But it's also interesting because Selton Mello and both Fernanda Torres are in this movie as well. Yeah. So as you mentioned. But I was quite surprised by the movie, and incredible that the relationship between the two, and they're just 1 year apart, right? I think this one is 1969 and I'm Still Here is 1970.
Yeah.
And both, with an ambassador's kidnap, because I think it was the German ambassador, wasn't it, in I'm Still Here, or the Swiss,
I think, yeah.
Swiss, I think it was,
Swedish,
yeah.
Exactly. And now we have the American ambassador, Charles, what was his name? Charles something?
Elbrick, yes.
Elbrick,
yeah. And I think, is Selton Mello's character the friend who gets shot and then tortured, I think? Is that right?
That's right.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say that he just has bad luck, but I'm assuming he read the scripts for both of these films and signed the contracts, and he doesn't fare well in either one of the films. So
they kill him off.
This film also stars Fernanda Montenegro as well. Did you realise that?
Yes, indeed.
So she's the nosy woman who's talking on the phone and looking out of the window.
Exactly.
So they have very congruent cast. It's like the new film is like a reunion almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I liked this film the very first time I saw it, and I think I saw it right around the same time that I saw Glengarry Glen Ross for the first time, and so I was on this little Alan Arkin kick, and it's interesting because you need someone like Alan Arkin in this film. I mean, you need a pretty well-known, should be probably an American actor just because it's an American character as well. But one thing that he brings to it, I think James mentioned some dignity, but he also just brings this veteran presence to it. I think, obviously, I think the Brazilians are all much younger actors and maybe younger filmmakers, and it plays very well in the film because there's something very novice about them all as characters. And the film it's not a big production film, and it's probably a fairly early film for Barreto as well. So I think both like in the film world, Arkin's character is this veteran presence, but also I think in just the making of the film as well, he seems like this veteran presence. And, again, probably doesn't play at all in America without a fairly well-known actor from the United States. It's Arkin has this sort of double presence in this film that I think really helps it.
He's just terrific, isn't he? And I think even his body language is so strong, because sometimes I felt the script let him down a bit. The dialogue wasn't always very natural. I felt it was quite heavy-handed, but again, he just really saves it. He's just such a good actor. I love him.
And I'm guessing that this film is broadly made for a Brazilian audience. And I'm guessing, will the makers be expecting their audience to read Alan Arkin's dialogue in subtitles? Or will your average Brazilian speak good enough English that they will get all of Alan Arkin's dialogue without subtitles?
They normally dub everything, unlike Portugal, for instance.
Okay.
So Portugal, for instance, uses subtitles, but Brazil, as almost all of Latin America, they dub all the English language movies. So they probably dubbed him as well.
I was thinking about that, James, because there's this one moment we're nowhere near there yet, but where Alan Arkin's character wets himself, and he said he admits that by saying, "I allowed myself a moment of incontinence." Which I don't think any Brazilian, I didn't think the character he was talking with would know what that meant.
I felt the same. It was so bad because I giggled at that moment instead of feeling really sorry for him. I was like, oh my God, really? Is that the line that they came up with?
Yeah. And I think it's there to sort of reinforce he's maintaining his dignity. He can still speak complete sentences with beautiful language and vocabulary choices, but it's probably not what the character says there. And I think I agree with you. I think the script does let the film down a little bit, but everything's strong enough that it's still a good film. By the way, I saw a rubbish version of this because it was right on YouTube. So I was trying to get a copy of it from the library, and then I've had some tech issues lately, so no one's getting my requests anywhere. But so I saw a version that just did no service to the film. So I actually remember it better when I saw it on IFC as looking much better than it did for me this time around.
I think it's a nice looking film. It's not showy, is it? It is small scale. It is low budget. It is fairly simply shot and lit. It's one thing I noticed. Clearly, they couldn't afford a dolly, but they could afford a tripod. So there's a lot of panning in this film. So there's a lot of just kind of angling the camera, off to the left or off to the right, and that's how they were doing the camera movement. But it's pacey. It moves along at a great pace. Exciting, intense, and at least for me, so I had no idea of the true story. I didn't know the genuine historical outcome. I found it, cliche alert, nail biting. I was absolutely gripped. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was plausible that they would kill Alan Arkin. I don't know whether we should we ring a spoiler bell for a 30-year-old film?
For the hell of it, I like the bell.
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah, seeing as we've dug it out of the bay by Rio, we'll ring it twice this week. Here we go. So here's the spoiler bell. Having rung that bell, I'm going to go straight back to the beginning of the movie and just talk about the opening image again. Yeah. Which is so it opens up with like some fascinating, genuine documentary footage of rioters in Brazil.
A huge demonstration,
Yes. One thing I noticed, their demonstrators really well dressed. They were kind of like, good-looking, well-dressed young people
right? Yeah.
throwing stones at the police. But I'm guessing that opening image is just trying to emphasize the notion that this is a real story. We are entering a real world here. I wonder whether what it's saying is that this is a story about people like you in the audience. Look, these are kind of, well-dressed, normal, dignified Brazilians, not crazy people. So I that was the kind of like the tone I was taking from that opening kind of footage. And in the same way that like the three friends who are in an apartment together when they're deciding, I want to do something, I want to join the military resistance. I love the production design of that apartment. I think it tells you an awful lot about them. Production design done some great work in this film with not very much money. So they have like these jazz posters. There's a poster of Che Guevara. Yeah. There's this beautiful red typewriter like in the background. Some lovely, lovely stuff, which I think really just sort of fills in all these little gaps in their characters. I looked up the reception for the film at the time, and interesting, the critics at the time kind of didn't particularly like this film, claimed that it was muddled and sort of wordy and too naive. But I think, in 2025, I think it looks pretty masterful, actually. It tries to find humanity in all of the characters, even the bad ones. And it is quite talky. But I think that the talk is generally not in service of padding out the story, but in service of exploring some pretty nuanced, ambiguous ideas. So I think I agree with what you said, Inês, that sometimes the script is not tremendously sophisticated, but they are talking over some interesting ideas and getting their money's worth out of it. I enjoyed it.
I felt so too. I didn't think that it always achieved that. One can tell, right, that the purpose of the film is to show that that they're two sides of the same coin, right? The revolutionaries and the military, and it tries to humanize both sides. I think at times it didn't really manage to do that so well, but overall, I think it's a great attempt. I felt like in terms of direction, it wasn't so clear in terms of what Bruno was trying to explore, Bruno Barreto, as opposed to Walter when we're comparing the two films. But there's a real, feels more like a thriller, whereas I'm Still Here feels more like a political drama, right? I feel that the tension here is stronger, and the acting, again, is really great. I think especially like the character of Fernando Gabeira, that will then be named Paulo, is really, really strong. And also even the bad guy, the secret police, Henrique, the actor called Marco Rica, he's also really excellent. You can see him now, actually. He plays the dad of Ayrton Senna in the series Senna, of the Formula One driver. Yeah. He plays his dad,
I mean, they try to humanize him, but they don't try too hard, do they?
Yeah. They don't go very deep, I'm afraid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they kind of, they show that he is, he's a secret policeman and he is torturing people, and he has, some self-awareness, and he is asking some questions, but he is also convinced that he's doing the right thing. It's like he has that kind of, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it kind of attitude, doesn't he? So it's not like we are invited to sympathise very deeply. The first time we meet him, he's with his girlfriend. He's wearing an extremely short nightie, and
she's
it's
quite
like the first moment she's discovered,
well.
what, you torture people?
I know.
And I think we in the audience are supposed to be like the girlfriend, aren't we? Kind of shocked and disappointed. She will not be wearing that nightie for him again, will she?
I found that scene a bit weak, actually, wasn't it? It was too long, and she just felt so
kind of a bit
naive, isn't it?
It's two people in a bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. So melodramatic, and it just went on forever. Like you achieved the purpose of the scene ages ago. It's like, we get it. Okay, move on.
And doesn't he mention there that he's having these regrets or these nightmares about things he's done, and then it's not too long before he's back to the old torturing ways. So quick character moment. I think that was the extent, as you said, James, of humanizing him. It doesn't really work too well.
Yeah.
There's another cute moment when Fernando, he meets like this actor friend of his who's in a doll's house. And kind of the actor says, "Oh, the paramilitaries and the military dictatorship. You are like the two ends of a horseshoe." Yep. Is what he said. It was a cute little sort of metaphor. I like that. It's sweet.
He's also very well known, that Eduardo Moscovi's actor. Honestly, like these are we're talking about, the best, that generation of actors, and they're still very much at the top of their game, and they're still in series, soap operas, films. So it's just very nice to see that sort of ensemble, and so young at the time, and playing these student guerrillas. It was very good. And
he only has a couple scenes. He's there early on when he's deciding he doesn't want to join their movement and wants to study acting, and then we see him right at that moment.
I have a feeling.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Also, because when I read Fernando Gabeira, he wasn't really involved in the kidnapping. He knew about it. So it's almost like he's that character. So he knew what the others were doing, but he wasn't really involved in the kidnapping. He was, he suffered a lot. He was shot, like Fernando was. He was shot in São Paulo. He was exiled in Sweden and other countries. So he suffered a lot during the military dictatorship, but in that particular event, he wasn't really involved. And I think perhaps he was that character that was that knew about what was going on, but didn't really wasn't him the leader of that movement as he was in the film.
Okay. Structurally, the film, it has that nice kind of straightforward motor driving things forward, that they set a deadline. That it's going to be 10 o'clock on this particular
night. Yeah, we love that as screenwriters, isn't it? 48 hours!
Absolutely. So, and we genuinely get a countdown, and it's like 7:30 in the evening, and the police are talking to each other about, some like to torture and some like to torture too much. Well, another 2.5 hours and we'll be murdering some people. And it does get to this kind of like this final dramatic moment. But I think, for a fairly simple, low-budget film, that drama and that tension really works. Yeah. I was eating some avocado on toast as we watched the film, and I like at the point when they were about to shoot the ambassador, I dropped my avocado on my trousers. so that's about as middle class a 5-star review as you'll ever hear. I think made me drop my avocado. But,
what a great illustration there.
And they play the tension right up until like the very last moment. His finger is on the trigger, isn't it? And then they announce, "Oh no, that they've met our demands. We're going to let him live."
I agree. It was very gripping.
So they get the absolute maximum out of it they can. And then like for this, very quick, I suppose, kind of I guess it's kind of like the climax of the second act, and you have a very short third act at the end. But they do this, this lovely 1970s conspiracy thriller type ending where they drive off to a football stadium and they release the now alive ambassador in a massive crowd.
Yeah, I love that part.
And you can tell that there are some helicopter shots of tens of thousands of people, and then there are ground shots where they had 15 extras who were milling about as hard as possible to make it look like there's lots of them there. But it's a really great kind of like 70s conspiracy thriller ending. I really enjoyed it. It's good. And then you have a coda at the end, which sees kind of Fernanda and Maria living together. Then they are caught, tortured, and finally released in 1979. And they go off to, is it Algiers?
Yeah, Algeria.
So like the final closing image of the film is like another sort of freeze frame of all the freedom fighters, like showing solidarity as they're about to be loaded onto a plane to be kind of it's not extradited, but sort of exiled or removed from the country anyway, go off to Algiers. So it kind of it begins and ends with kind of the photography of these kind of people resisting. So it does sort of echo like the beginning and ending, those three photographs in I'm Still Here.
Absolutely. And again, that was an exchange of the release of the kidnapped German ambassador. So that was also very interesting. Right. So they were released because before, remember, they kidnapped the American ambassador, and they wanted, I think it was the release of 15 political prisoners, one of them Sultan Mello's character, Osvaldo. And then the film ends with that exchange, but now for the German ambassador. So it has, it has a really nice circle. Nice, I wouldn't say nice because it's pretty horrific. And the fact that it's such a bleak ending, isn't it? When you see Maria, which she's she's maimed, right? And she's so charismatic, Fernanda Torres, isn't she? Yeah. She's just brilliant. Just her face, just as her expression is just so brutally poignant. It just stayed with me for, just lingered. I woke up the next day just still thinking about her, which is, very similar to the qualities that she displayed in I'm Still Here.
At least in this film, we do see more chinks in her armour, don't we? So the first time we see her, she has this great body language. She's always standing with her feet kind of like wide apart, shoulders back.
Militant.
She looks kind of like super tough, but we are allowed a little glimpse inside the kind of the suit of armour. And she does kind of demonstrate sort of a bit of fear and weakness and worry and anxiety. And I appreciated seeing a little bit more of the inner turmoil. Not super easy to see this film then. And I don't know whether it's just one of those things that turns up on telly in Portugal and Brazil all the time, but not nearly as widely seen in the West.
I'm afraid I had never seen it. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, there you go. Okay, so clearly not then.
I'm not sure if it was very well received in Brazil at the time. I know we were just talking about how I'm Still Here was a phenomenon, like a box office phenomenon, how it brought young generations to the theatres again. I'm not sure that this movie did the same at the time, but again, it was a very different time when it was released. It was the early 2000s or 99, wasn't it?
Yeah, 97, I think, something like that, yes.
So I really don't know. I had never heard of the film again. Like the Dona Flor e Seus Dois Maridos was very popular, but I think it should be. I'm sure, like perhaps in schools, they should watch this film.
Oh yeah.
I think it's worth a little revival. I think maybe the audience for I'm Not Here might look for this film. I think it's a good companion piece, and it's a little.
It really is a good companion
hidden
piece.
gem, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of said how much these two films have in common. We will do a synthesis, but before we do that, I'm going to force both of you, while wearing a hood, with just two little eye holes cut out of it, and pointing a gun at you, I'm going to force you to play my favourite game, Who Am I?
Who am I?
So we've seen, like, I tell you what, we've seen a whole lot of very, very good-looking people this week in both films. I was kind of bowled over at how good-looking everybody was in 4 Days in September. They were all so gorgeous.
Yeah.
But out of all those fantastically good-looking people, was there anybody who particularly reminded you of yourself on screen this week?
Mm-hmm.
I can answer first if.
Oh yeah,
this might be a surprise for Inês that she has to identify a character.
That's true. Yeah, we'll buy you some time.
I shall not. No, go on.
I'll speak slowly. Another thing about characters is some of them have two names in this week's film. So
oh yes,
I think see myself most in Paulo Fernando. I don't know if he's the protagonist. We'll talk about that during synthesis time, perhaps.
Interesting.
But he's a man of all words and very little action. That felt similar. And he's a pretender when it comes to the actual violence of revolution.
Right.
But he manages to get the girl even if it doesn't really work out so well. So I definitely sympathized with him, and I saw myself in Paulo and Fernando. Maybe I resemble two characters this week.
Two for the price of one.
To me, he was the one that had the most emotional depth. Andres,
yes,
definitely.
Just like you.
Oh, shucks! Thank you for being here. James never says stuff like that about me.
Oh, that's why you invited me, right? Yeah.
I watched this film. I wish I could claim that I was like the like the self-controlled, clever, compassionate American ambassador.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In 4 Days in September, but I'm not.
Oh.
And then for a while I thought, if I'm like anybody, I'm probably like the dog, and I'm still here. Insofar as like you're fairly unkempt with poor road safety skills. But you know, having heard what you said, I think I also feel a bit like Fernando.
Yeah.
In 4 Days in September, not because I consider myself an accomplished writer, and I do not have a red typewriter, but because there's this scene where he has to take his hood off because he's going to shoot Elbrick, and he takes his hood off, and his glasses are all steamed up, and he can't see anything, and that is me to a T. That is me every day in the kitchen. Yeah, I sympathise with that very deeply. Yes, I felt his pain.
That's good. That's good.
This is very, it's weird because I don't feel I have the bravery of any of these characters. So yeah, probably the dog. The only thing I identified with was with Eunice, just the fact that she loved swimming in the sea. Yeah. And that it was just me. And the fact that I'm a mother, but surely I would fail tremendously at that task of trying to keep a brave face the whole entire time as my family would deteriorate. And yeah, I just can't imagine being able to do what she did.
Yeah, I know, my God.
It's just so incredible and admirable. But yeah, I did relate with that. Sometimes just going under the surface or just floating and looking at the sky and just being around those two brothers' heels and trying to, you know, sometimes forget the difficult days that may have happened. And yeah, that probably is just the closest bit to any character, but definitely not like these. Again, I'm not as brave as all these student revolutionaries as they all are in 4 Days of September.
But you are the strongest swimmer out of the three of us. So yes, fair enough.
You know, there was once I remember like swimming really far deep, but the lifeguard knew me by then because I used to do this every day, and I was really struggling. I was really, really struggling to come back to the shore.
Wow.
The waves were so strong because the current was really, really strong. And he was just like laughing. He would just see me struggling, like really big time. And I could see him looking at me. And I, you know, raised my arm and waved, you know, like meaning, can you help? And he just stood there, like just looking at me. And I was like, oh my God. I remember like when I got to the shore, like I fell to my feet, you know, like I was so tired. And he was like, yeah. Sea's rough today, isn't it? I was like, oh my, fuck you. Honestly, I was so angry. I never forgot that moment. Oh, yeah.
Is there a lifeguard complaints hotline?
Yeah, probably
I think there
should be.
Deep wind.
Yeah, Fernanda Montenegro should start that, yes. Fernanda Torres, sorry, Montenegro's a mum. She probably swam there as well.
Yeah,
that was a brilliant, actually, that moment with the mum, right? Fernanda's Montenegro nosy neighbour.
Oh, yeah.
It was just such a character moment. It was so brilliant.
We've all lived next door to someone like that, I think. Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, let's struggle out of the sea, dry ourselves off, run a comb through our hair, those of us who still got it, and we'll do our synthesis if we can bring these two films together. So I've written down in my notebook, because I'm just not clever enough to have thoughts without writing down on paper. I wrote, these two have a lot in common. Mm-hmm. Did you get that? So two dramas about the Brazilian military dictatorship, about which I kind of knew nothing before this week. So I feel like at least I've learned something historical. So they are two films starring Fernanda Torres. Yeah. Two films that try and take a nuanced, humane angle on a dark episode in 20th century history. Or at least like a bit of history that is poorly taught and understood in the UK, at least. Yeah. Two films that kind of make use of documentary footage and trying to lean very hard into that kind of period angle. So they have a lot in common.
Yeah. Yeah. Two adaptations based on true stories.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So like these films are like brother and sister. So I always thought what's more interesting is how they differ. And out of the two, I'm prepared to be told you disagree, but I personally found 4 Days in September less subtle but more nuanced. Does that mean something?
No.
At least insofar as in yeah, it doesn't mean anything, does it? In I'm Still Here, like the military dictatorship are basically the bogeyman.
Yeah.
They are sort of fairly two-dimensional, cardboard cutout, direct from central casting baddies. Whereas at least 4 Days in September, does attempt to allow us to get inside the mind of the military dictatorship. Bad people, I guess commonly think they are the good people doing a difficult job. So it was interesting to see that angle. Whereas in I'm Still Here, the bad guys are they are very frightening, but sort of a bit cartoonish, maybe.
I think that's that's good. That's valid. Yeah, I take my no back. I will say yes. It's less nuanced and more subtle, or vice versa.
I'm not sure if I agree entirely with that.
Like a percent. Very good. Good. Well done.
Sorry about that. I just felt like that subtlety. I didn't feel that nuance was very well explored. It felt quite superficial. Again, we only had that scene with the girlfriend to show that the Secret Services or that particular agent was having second thoughts or was having nightmares about what he was doing. And I was a bit let down by some moments towards the end where it felt that the students, that they were sort of comparing them, that the young student soldiers are really not so different from their radical peers,
right?
And from the secret police, and they're using violence, and I just felt not really. You can't really compare the two.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I agree. You're right. These two things are not the same.
Exactly, and it just felt like you can't really, and especially that was mentioned more towards the ending, and you just feel like we just watched this whole movie and this is your message. That really, so I just felt that was a bit wrong, and you can't really compare the two and put them at the same level, and so I was a bit let down by it. And there was even like I think it was a conversation between Maria and Fernanda's character right at the end,
right.
And again, talking about how it didn't work and the dreams.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that this is at the expense of, this is terrible. Like at one point, he says, you have no house, no name, no life, right? And this is a huge ordeal for them. And they risked everything that they had. But we should think that it was worth it, right? Because they were one step closer to bringing down the military, even if they weren't. That we can't really think that this was a lost cause, and I think that's the wrong message to sort of imply. And I felt that was a bit suggested at the end. Did you feel the same? I don't know. Perhaps it was just my view, but I felt.
Well, I feel the same now that you've pointed it out, rather than
Sorry.
truly seeing things in the very superficial terms and leaving it at that.
What do you feel? How do you feel, Lorente, Andres?
Yeah, I think one fault in 4 Days in September is there is a lot of on-the-nose revolutionary talk and sort of remembering things that I'm Not Here does not have. So in terms of getting some important messages straight through dialogue, it's definitely not very subtle. I didn't feel a whole lot I loved the menace in I'm Not Here. I've already talked about how low key it is and how scary it was to me.
Yeah.
Whereas the menace, it's much heavier handed in 4 Days in September. And yet I didn't feel that. But by the investigators, I didn't feel terribly threatened, which was an odd feeling. And in fact, there's this one scene I've got to point out because it was laughable. I thought it was
when he follows them?
Yeah, the following scene. Yeah. It's just hilarious. I thought this is right out of Shakespeare. Like he's barely following them. I mean, he's not hiding at all. And they know he's behind. That he's behind them. And they've just gone to the house to sort of confirm that they're in the kidnap. That's where the kidnapping is, with the ambassadors there. And then Fernando's character is told to go follow them, and he follows them very closely, so that they're in the same shot all the time, and it's just not settled on. As a result, there's this moment of comic relief, I guess, and I don't know if that's intentional. I thought it was hilarious because I thought I'm in a theater watching Shakespeare where someone's talking at the same volume as the people he's eavesdropping upon. And he's just right there. If they just turn their heads at the right moment, they'll see him. So it sort of defanged them as a menacing presence, I think. So they're not very subtle. And I think that, I think there's a difference in subtleties between the two films. And a lot of that's, I think, just 30 years between films and filmmaking practices and cinematic language, perhaps. But I like both films.
And how the information was so easily given, right? Everyone knew. Then suddenly the baker knew where they lived, and it was all very convenient, wasn't it?
I love the too many pizzas scene too, because I mean, for me, you can never have too many pizzas, but you at least, if you're going to buy in that quantity, you don't want to do it in one store. You just have to buy your pizzas in several places to feed the rebels. But I think again that sort of played into the novice nature of the whole production, really, and that these guys are not really professional kidnappers, if such a thing. Yeah, I suppose such a thing does exist.
How they cooked? But they wouldn't have been cooked. Exactly. How they cooked?
Yes. So I mean, it sort of underscores the sort of naive nature of the kidnappers and such, that they're going to make some rudimentary mistakes. So no one is as much of a thriller as it is. No one is really that menacing. So it really just starts to become more about the characters and the story. And I think that, in some ways that's a good thing.
Can I just ask, how did you both feel about the glasses, those black sunglasses?
Oh, that they put on
with the tape over them.
Yeah, it didn't seem like the most effective way to blind someone. Yeah.
I just kept on wondering every time they put them on. I was like, really? Is this it?
Yeah, well, they're definitely dependent.
They can't see anything.
They were depending on him being a very compliant kidnappee, I guess, right?
Yeah, don't look out of the corner of your eye there. I promise I won't.
Exactly.
No peripheral vision. Don't use your peripheral vision.
But I can only assume if Fernando is anything like me, as soon as they take his glasses off, they may as well have had a hood on him, because I can't see a thing without my glasses. I'm effectively blind, with or without the tape over these sunglasses. So it all works. It all works. There's one other thing which I think is an interesting comparator, which I think these films, when you put them back to back, they have something to say about becoming a parent. Insofar as like the young naive paramilitaries in 4 Days in September. They kind of only have one thing to think about, really, which is the future of their country and their love of freedom, and their kind of their loyalty to their buddies or to their group. Whereas for Eunice in I'm Still Here, she has this enormous responsibility of a family, and trying to reconcile, acting in a political world with protecting, this family that you have spawned, is a much more complicated problem to negotiate. So it's very interesting how important that moment is where she decides to clean herself up rather than go and see her children immediately, because she knows that the way that they see her will affect a lot of how they feel about the world and their personal security and their worldview. Whereas, for the young, naive MR8 paramilitaries, none of that is important. Maybe they have a bit of a wobble and then they have sex on a mattress, and that's kind of as complicated as it gets emotionally. For the young rebels, it's a very different kind of set of problems that Eunice is negotiating. And so I guess that's, straddling those two different responsibilities is a lot of the motor of her kind of her personal journey in the new film. Yeah.
Well, I'm not here really focuses on biological family at its heart, whereas there's sort of this inherited or put together family of the rebels in 4 Days in September. So they definitely have, and I think that's a good point that you bring up. I think that makes a big difference in the film, because you know exactly who Fernanda's fighting for, who she's working for in I'm Not Here, and these ideas of rebellion and undoing a dictatorship. Those are less tangible, so it makes the emotional connection a little more difficult to maintain. But it's there are different stories, and they just have different angles on family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
agree.
there's also another thing where, again, here you've got Fernanda Torres. She ends up in a wheelchair in both films, one way or another. And I'm wondering, hey, are you reading these scripts before you sign your contracts? Terrible things are happening to your characters. So that was another. And even for Selton Mayo, I mean, he ends up in prison getting tortured in both films. So
Yes.
Indeed.
Oh, man.
You know, he's a director as well.
Yeah.
Selton Mello. Yeah, he's quite a prolific actor and director. Yeah.
So what am I? Why should I be giving him any criticism at all? He's obviously doing it right. Maybe I should get tortured in more.
Not
movies.
choosing the right parts.
Yeah.
That's why he started directing.
Oh.
Because he was getting shot in all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't die in the first one. He went. Did he go? Where did he go? He was released to Mexico, wasn't he? Osvaldo.
Yeah, that's unclear. I think he's not tortured to death by any means, and I think we do see a little bit of his torture. There's not a ton of torture in either film, which I think is great. Again, if you it's like the shark that you don't show, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
it's
a bit
much
more
so
sinister
when
if you
you
don't
see
see it happening. There's just the indication. So that in that sense, both films are subtle, I think.
It's a great choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a great directorial choice.
I think there are questions at least one point, or at some points in both films, you're not really entirely sure whose story it is. It's not like blatant protagonism, it's not like there's just one person who's going to carry the film and be in every scene. Both films definitely open up the story world and the point of view to multiple characters. And I think, again, I'd like to see that. It's refreshing because we're always told as writers, you're going to put your protagonist in every scene and it really has to be very clearly about someone, but you can bend those rules a little bit, and I think it makes for more interesting films ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Well, two good films this
Can
week.
I tell you an interesting fact as well?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That would please Lorente. Fernando Gaviria is also the father of Maya Gabeira, who's this incredible big surfer, big wave surfer.
Oh, wow.
That also features in that Gareth McNamara documentary about the Ericeira and big wave riders, and she's one of them. So how interesting!
Wow.
Yeah,
They live well down there in Brazil. There's no question about it. At least the wealthy. The wealthy live well down there.
Yeah, exactly. The wealthy live well. This is all the Zona Sul of Rio, which is the south zone, which is the wealthy zone. We're only talking about that, which is its own little bubble.
Yeah.
So I feel like the main conclusion I'm drawing from his synthesis now is that Brazil is full of nepo-babies. Is that right? That's the main thing I've learned?
Yeah,
okay.
That's it. I hope you do go and visit Brazil, because it really is. It's an incredible, and especially Rio, where all of this is set. Those beautiful shots of the Christ Redeemer and the whole Tijuca forest and the beach and Botafogo area with the forest in the background. All of that, it just shows how incredible Rio is as a city.
This podcast brought to you by the Brazilian Tourist Board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll fly there tomorrow by first class.
Two good films this week. Nice to see nice to do a podcast where both films are good.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly different kinds of good, but both good. I thought we have just got time to talk about what else has been playing at this theatre.
Last night I saw the Penguin Lessons.
Oh, right, okay, right.
Oh.
That's another South American movie,
It's another
isn't it?
South American movie, and it's another dictatorship movie. It's, I think, 1976, takes place in Argentina. Jonathan Pryce is in there, too, and I think those are the two actors you would know. It starts very clunky. It's a very funny thing, but it gets its feet about, I don't know, 10 or 15, 12, 20 minutes in, and we were both delighted. I thought it was very funny. He plays a very gruff and grumpy character, an English teacher in Argentina, ends up adopting a penguin and taking it back to school. I was pleasantly surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, it's not a great film, and it's very funny how poorly it starts and then how much better it becomes in such a short period of time. So
Yeah, interesting.
It's good.
yeah.
I feel like my experience so commonly seems to be the other way around, that I've seen so many films that have a great opening 10 minutes and then don't know what to do. But
Yeah.
so that's where all the bad 10 minutes went. They went into the Penguin list.
A risky start, yeah.
We watched Last Breath this week. I don't know if that's out in cinemas elsewhere. It's out in the UK here. So it is a kind of a deep sea drama based on a 2019 documentary which has the same name, all about this one incident of a diver in the North Sea who has like a diving accident and then is stranded on the bottom of the North Sea with his oxygen running out.
Wow.
It's a very brisk 90 minutes, and we came out and I looked at Rachel and I said that was the definition of a 3-star film. It's it's really fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's pretty tense and exciting. I didn't know what the outcome was, so it sort of kept me in suspense. But it doesn't, not quite enough happens to sustain those 90 minutes, so it feels a little bit stretched out. And and for every very dramatic, exciting moment, there are also quite a few scenes of some pretty terrible acting. There's this ship's captain, and he has to make these big momentous decisions about should we rescue the divers or should we move on or whatever. And for all the world, he looks like he's trying to choose whether to have chips or potato wedges for his tea. It looks incredibly blank all the way through. But 3 stars out of 5. Good fun, kept me entertained for 90 minutes. Well done.
I was going to say if it's 3 stars out of 3, that's pretty darn good. But I'm glad to know you use the 5-star scale as well.
3 stars out of 15. Yes. Inês, have you seen much lately?
Oh God, I watched The Apprentice, which made me feel so depressed. Honestly, the film is pretty good. I found that I thought it was going to be worse. Actually, I didn't really have great expectations about it, and I thought it was better than I thought. Especially, I thought that Jeremy Strong's performance was really absolutely phenomenal, and Sebastian Stan also so terrifyingly good. But I just felt like I really don't want to see more of Trump. Like, why am I watching this? Yeah. Because it's so close to reality, and it's just so depressing what's happened in the film and how it's still happening in real life. So I just
amazing that we had The Apprentice and Civil War all like a few months before the election, and it doesn't appear to have moved the needle in any way.
No,
Exactly. How is that possible? Honestly, really, I'm still in disbelief. Really, after all these months, every time I open the news, I'm like, oh no. Well, I'm sure it's worse for you, Andres.
Yeah, we're sure it's worse for you, Andres.
Yeah, we don't talk about these things on the podcast anymore. We're a little frightened about
sorry.
until where there's going to be a knock on the door. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is now.
Sorry.
There they are.
Couldn't resist.
So just before the secret police arrive, we have just enough time to do the socials. We still seem to be on Instagram at 2 Real Cinema Club. Every week I promise we'll move to Blue Sky. I promise we will do that eventually. Read the blog at 2 Real Cinema Club. Comment on our YouTube channel or email us. We love your emails. We are 2realcinemaclub@gmail.com. Next time, we are going to be watching some films about clones, I think. We're going to be watching Mickey 17, and we haven't quite decided what we're going to compare it to yet, so we're all ears if you have suggestions. Inês, always a pleasure to have you on the pod. Thank you so much for bringing a spark of intelligence.
Thank you.
Otherwise, 2 middle-aged men talking about guff. Please come on again soon.
Thank you for enlightening me as ever and making me laugh, which is the only reason why you keep inviting me, because I laugh at your jokes. So that's why.
Oh my God, the pressure. Right, we'll try and come up with some good material for next time. Until then, we're at the Popcorn Counter next week talking about something or other. We hope we will see you then. Thanks as always for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, gentlemen.